This is along the same lines of church leaders acting badly, Republicans acting badly, but you know the drill by now. So here's the headline I want to show you here, um, because this is what I saw, and it looked like it can't be real, but it is. Wisconsin Senate approves amendment blocking church closures during public state of emergencies. Whoops, come back. There we go. So the Wisconsin Senate wants to change the constitution in their state to make sure churches can't be shut down if there's another pandemic. And if that seems messed up, yeah, it totally is. So just to be clear, here's the backdrop here before I get into what the bill says. In March of 2020, when everyone started taking COVID seriously, Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, a Democrat, he issued a stay-at-home order, basically saying everyone needs to stay inside. We don't know what's going on with COVID right now. It seems bad, so stay indoors. The only exceptions are for essential activities. Now, going like grocery shopping, you know what I mean? Now, going to a religious service was deemed an essential activity, even though I would argue you could do that over Zoom or a live stream. You don't need to go in person. But like everything else, Tony Evers said it was limited to 10 people maximum. Because at the time, we did not know a lot about COVID, but it seemed like the problem was when you have a lot of people packed in one place. So he said you can go to church, but only 10 people maximum at a time. And that was absolutely inconvenient. That whole year was very inconvenient to a lot of people. But it's not like he was singling out religious people. This applied to everybody who wanted to gather for a thing they wanted to do. If you wanted to go see a show, if you wanted to go see a movie, you couldn't do it, right? So he just said you can go to church, but very small numbers at a time. So Republicans in Wisconsin at the time treated that restriction like it was Christian persecution. So the conservative Supreme Court in Wisconsin at the time struck down Evers' order 4-3. And if you know anything about Wisconsin, it's that the state legislature is so heavily gerrymandered that there are so many Republican state senators and Republicans in the state house, they can get away with doing whatever they want, even though they don't represent the whole state. So they could just override anything Tony Evers wanted to do. And the thing is, they actually tried passing a bill to allow people to go to church all they wanted to. Tony Evers did veto their bill, and I think they did not have the numbers at the time to override it. That's why they're now trying to pass a constitutional amendment, because Tony Evers cannot veto that. And one of the things that one of these lawmakers said is that at the time, here we go. Let me show this. Let me share this with you here, if I could pull this up. This is what one of the Republicans said at the time. In defense of the new amendment, during the pandemic, we saw places of worship forcibly closed at a time when many needed their faith communities and spiritual advisors the most, said a Republican and author of the Senate resolution. Basically, he's saying churches were forcibly closed during the pandemic. They were not. They were open, but like everywhere else, they were restricted. So let me show you what the bill actually says, what that guy proposed, because it's not a lot of words here. This is the Senate bill. This is Senate Joint Resolution 54. And if you scroll down here, it would just add a little bit to the current law. And it says, in case of an emergency or anything, you can't infringe on the right to worship, nor shall the state or political subdivision of the state order the closure of or forbid gatherings in places of worship in response to a state of emergency at the national, state, or local level, including an emergency related to public health. To put that another way, if another COVID crisis happens real soon, and it very well might, and we realize this is an airborne pathogen, and it's a virus that is spread when people are in close contact and their mouths are close to each other. And the best thing we can do to stop it is to keep people separated as much as possible. And if that ever happens again, this amendment, if it becomes a law, would say, fine, you could shut down grocery stores, you could shut down movie theaters, but you can't close churches. All churches would be allowed to be super spreader events, which of course the whole point of that is that it would never stay within the church. It's not like only people who go to church would get hurt or be in harm's way, because of course they would get the virus and then go back home and spread it elsewhere. So it's a public health hazard for everybody. That's the problem with this bill. And all the Republicans, by the way, they passed it on a 21-10 vote in the Wisconsin Senate, party line vote, all Republicans. All those Republicans call themselves pro-life. Like, they will do anything for a fetus. But if you're born, like, whatever, grandma has to be sacrificed for the sake of Christian persecution. We got to make sure churches are open. So here's the thing. Here's what's going to happen. The Wisconsin House is also going to pass a similar version of this bill. In order for it to become a law, the next legislature in 2 years has to pass the exact same bill. And if that happens, then it goes to a vote of the entire state. And if the majority of the state says yes, then it gets added to the state constitution. Very onerous procedure. It'll take several years for this to happen. The only way to stop it at this point, because Tony Evers can't do it, the only way for it to stop, I'm hoping, is that now Wisconsin has a liberal 4-3 majority on the Supreme Court. And we're hoping, liberals are hoping, that Supreme Court says gerrymandering in the state is illegal. And it creates boundary lines that are actually fair and let voters choose their representatives instead of the other way around. If that happens, maybe the next legislature in Wisconsin is actually in the Democratic Party's favor because it's fair, and then they're not going to go along with this. But to me, that's the only way this is really going to be stopped, unless voters, in 5 years' time don't approve it. But that's what has to happen for this not to happen. But it just boggles my mind that all these people are fighting for the opportunity to spread a virus in the name of Jesus. They think like we are the specially persecuted ones because our churches were closed, even though they treat this like God's not going to listen to them if they listen to their pastor over, a YouTube live stream. Or if they do a worship session over Zoom, God doesn't care. They act like the only way for them to get in touch with God is by going to a church in person, spread a virus if that happens, because none of these people believe in the virus. They think it's all a hoax anyway. And then they would spread it to all of us. Like, this is a public safety problem. This isn't about religious, freedom. This is about Christians having the right to murder anyone they want by spreading a virus that could kill anybody. The Freedom from Religion Foundation Action Fund said churches do not have a right to hold super spreader events, endangering both their congregants and their neighbors. And I think that's true. And this is what happens when you have so little regard for science and other human beings and respect for elected authority figures. I mean, the pastors who would go along with this are so selfish or cowardly that they would rather put their own congregations in harm's way than accept a temporary inconvenience for the sake of the entire community. It's appalling behavior. It is so typical of white evangelicals and conservative Catholics who have made it clear over the past several years that their faith-based desires must be a priority for the government, even when others will suffer. And they do this with abortion. They do it with LGBTQ rights. They do it with gun safety. What they want always takes a priority to what everyone else needs because they think they are special because they are Christian and they are conservative and they are Republicans. And now their disdain for humanity could kill off it would hurt. It could hurt so many more Wisconsinites and then everybody else. So again, I hope this doesn't go all the way. I hope it doesn't get in their constitution. But the first big hurdle they have now passed in Wisconsin.